Hi, everybody. My name is Pepper Youngs. I'm with California State Parks. I'm a curator. I'm presenting on behalf of myself and Claire Phillips, who's an archivist with California State Parks. She graduated the HARP program in 2019, and I did in 2018. This is going to be an extremely quick overview of some of the evacuations from our fire seasons in 2020 and 2021, with a specific focus on Indian Grinding Rock State Historic Park. That evac happened this year, and we get to focus on that one because I happen to be the collection manager and I ran that evac from start to finish. So I'll have some notes about how that went. The HARP program was such a huge impact on the success of that operation, and just some important lessons learned. So just a really quick summary of all of the wildfire evacuations from state parks in the last 2 years. We had two very active fire years in 2020 and 2021. This is totaling tens of thousands of museum collection objects. We're really lucky with state parks that we have a curatorial emergency response team, and that's a list of trained curatorial staff who know how to pack quickly and respond to wildfire events. It is comprised of archivists like Claire, collection managers, historians, curators, curatorial aides, things like that. So when we get a call for a wildfire that a park is threatened that has a collection, we then get dispatched as a team to then do the evac. And then those collections get returned to the statewide collections facility in Sacramento, where they're frozen and then stored until they can be safely returned. Today, I'm going to specifically be talking about the Caldor Fire. That fire had the largest impact on state parks this year. It was the second largest fire this year in the state. Dixie Fire was first. The Calder Fire started on August 14th, and I've highlighted just a few different time points showing how quickly that fire grew over the first few days and why we responded as we did. So for Indian Grinding Rock, that was the first park that was evacuated based on the Calder Fire. Indian Grinding Rock, you can't see it, but it's around down here on this map. It started on August 14th in Grizzly Flats, and the fire then grew with tremendous force over the next few days, with southwest winds moving the fire towards the northeast. I've highlighted these 2 points showing that between the night of the 17th and the morning of the 18th, the fire grew almost 50,000 acres overnight, which was just unprecedented growth. And that was partly because of southwest winds, but also because this entire region where the Calder Fire hit has extremely dense forest. It is extremely dry due to drought conditions, and it hasn't burned in over 100 years. So it really was a worst case scenario. The morning of the 18th, we received word that the winds were going to be changing from southwest winds, meaning they're blowing towards the northeast, to northeast winds, meaning they were going to be blowing towards the southwest, directly towards the park. So given how quickly that fire exploded overnight, we obviously were extremely nervous knowing that we were within, at this point, I think we were within about 15 miles of it. So the Calder Fire eventually burned for 67 days over 220,000 acres and would result in the evacuation of 3 state parks. And we'll talk about Indian Grinding Rock. So this is the view of the plume from Indian Grinding Rock. This is the morning of the 17th, the day before the evacuation. This is the rock in front of us. We're looking north towards the fire. And over here on the side is the museum that we evacuated. So you can see the park is a oak meadow in the middle of a really dense pine forest. So we are a huge wildfire risk. And I was obviously very nervous as the collection manager and park supervisor for this location about this wind shift we were about to experience. I was also in the really weird position of the collection manager, where obviously with the HARP program training I've had and the emergency response experience, I was ready to start packing, but I wasn't allowed to start packing until I got permission from my district leadership, which they didn't want to give for various reasons. And so I was ready to start. We knew the winds were going to shift. I wasn't allowed to start packing, so I just started doing what I was allowed to do, and that was preparation. That mostly came in the form of photographs and label planning, which it sounds crazy to say it now, but one of the biggest things I learned from HART in 2018 was the importance of record keeping during an evac. When we're responding to wildfires, Often boxes don't get labeled, which seems like a crazy thought to collection managers, but you don't have time necessarily when a fire is moving your way to stop, look for the object number, label every box, make sure it gets put in the right place. And so I tried to come up with a faster system, rather than having our, should the collection get evacuated, rather than having people tracking down object numbers. Just a really quick way to do some record keeping to help reduce that risk of disassociation, which is really elevated during an evac. So the very first thing I did was just take pictures of everything I could, every corner of the museum, every object. The records for Indian Grinding Rock are pretty good. They're not perfect. And so I didn't want to rely on them entirely for object tracking, just in case things had to move or something wasn't quite right. And so as a backup, I just took hundreds of photographs. They were automatically saved on the cloud. So it was really comforting knowing that I had that backup system, to help reduce that disassociation risk, and that during the reinstall, I not only had my written records, but these photographic records to make sure everything ended up back where it came from. I also, this took like 15 minutes and ended up being a huge help. I just drafted some quick emergency case labels so that people who were doing an evac didn't need to write the full object number on a box. They could just write the alpha code for the case. And then I would know, like, okay, this box has a letter A on it, came from case A. It's one of 8 objects that were in that case. So it's not perfect, but it made a big difference. It was way easier for packers. And it gave me, like I said, that extra comfort of knowing that, there's this extra fail safe, should to help prevent disassociation. So during the evac, everyone got a copy of this really quick map I made for our cases and their codes, and every case had one of these little letter, tags on it. Super fast, made a huge difference. I didn't end up getting permission to start really packing the entire collection until 6 p.m. on the night of the 18th. So again, until that point, trying to prep as much as I could. I didn't have other curatorial staff, but I did have maintenance staff and I had visitor services staff. And so I had them prepping object or packing materials. So building boxes, prepping working stations, and that all made a huge difference so that all of that was ready to go once we started. When we finally did get permission to evacuate, it was 6 p.m. I had already worked, almost a 10-hour day. I would end up working a 21-hour day during this entire endeavor, which I do not recommend. It was not safe. But luckily, at 9 p.m., we had our support staff from Sacramento come to help. And that included Claire Phillips, who has little stars over her. The evacuation effort took 7 hours total. We evacuated the entire museum, the entire collections room, as well as all of our important records. So it was a huge success. I think I have heard that we set a time record for an evac, and all of that extra prep work that I needed to do, thanks to the HEART program, was a major contributing factor in that. Not to mention the fact that we had people like Claire who are so trained and stuff like this who responded and helped so much. So that's a extremely quick summary of, I forgot something really important. One of the major reasons why we finally did get permission to do the evac was because of tribal involvement. So Indian Grinding Rock has really great tribal relations. We're really lucky for that. And it's because when our neighboring town finally got the evacuation warning, our tribal members who work at the park started calling our district saying, why aren't you guys evacuating the collection? And it was because of that pressure from the tribes that our district finally gave us permission. So not only was that so incredibly important, as a collection manager, to not only have their blessing to do the evac, but also they came and acted as tribal observers during the entire evac. So they were there watching so that if something was being handled improperly, they could say something. Luckily, that didn't happen. Everyone has really good training. But we knew that we had their blessing. They had the comfort that we were doing everything securely. And it was just it was so important to have them there. Got the whole collection out. It went to Sacramento for storage and freezing. The park was then closed for 2 weeks. We got really, really lucky at IGR that the fire did not continue in our direction that night, even though conditions did get really bad. Instead, it continued moving to the southeast. We all know it went to Tahoe. I'll get to that. For the next 2 weeks, we then focused on just park stability and structural safety. So we have all of our fire ice staged right here for structural protection. Our gates were closed and locked. And then I set up this kind of goofy instant command center for the park itself so that any staff who was on site, they had access to emergency shutoff information, emergency phone numbers, emergency lights, headlamps, radios, stuff like that. So it was that whole effort took maybe 2 hours to put together. It was really important for the next 2 weeks while we were closed. Okay, so this is the final progression map for Calder. It moved up towards Tahoe on August 30th. That was the day that the fire reached Tahoe, and I'm sorry, August 31st. I think the fire reached Tahoe. They evacuated the city of South Lake Tahoe, and that was when we got the call to evacuate the parks in Tahoe. I'm not going to talk about that too much. It was a 3-day event, so it was a much longer evacuation. We had to, stay up in Truckee, so not immediately on site, a little bit out of the ways. But I just want to show another type of museum that sometimes we evacuate, which are these house museums. So it had like a dozen bedrooms, extremely heavy Nordic furniture. We had 24 people respond. It was a 3-day effort. And here's some more pictures of, there's Claire and I, there's me and Claire. This is obviously near the end of the evac, but we got, again, that whole thing evacuated, huge success. I am pretty much out of time, but some very quick takeaways from the IGR evac as the leader of that response. Primarily, we're all about safety and security. The most important thing is that up until now, we haven't had rangers on site when we've been doing evacs, which is wild because rangers are pretty much our only law enforcement with state parks. We rely on them really heavily. And so during an evac, you need them there for collection security. You have open museums, you have open trucks. It's a really easy opportunity for theft. Also for incident updates, people who are packing don't have time to be getting fire updates while it's going on. And so you really need that person who is connected with the actual instant command center who's getting constant fire behavior updates in case you need to get people out of there quickly. And also for personal safety, fire evacuations, because they're on the clock and moving so quickly, are frantic environments. People are moving really quickly, carrying heavy things, and people get hurt. We had 3 bad falls this year. Luckily, we didn't have one at Indian Grinding Rock. But you need a ranger there to help provide first aid if necessary. Other major security concern is if you're worried about doing an evac, make sure you know that your collection, what the situation is like at your collection facility at night, not just during opening hours. At IGR, we worked all night until 4 a.m. and it got really, really dark. We had a few headlamps. But we are so lucky that we didn't lose power, which they cut power all the time in fire situations, because if we had lost power in the middle of that evac, it would have been a horrible situation. It would have been pitch black. So know what your facilities are like at night. And lastly, it's make sure you keep really good communication with your group. I was the lead. I was so tired. I got really frantic by like midnight, 1 a.m. It really helped to have other people there, keep my head on straight. But I really should have had a group meeting at one point because we had different groups responding to help with the evacuation. And some of these groups didn't know each other and ended up getting suspicious of each other, even though they were all there for the right reason. Everyone who was there was supposed to be there. But because I didn't communicate that well enough, like we had curators not knowing who the tribal observers were and we're getting freaked out by them being there. So just make sure, like at some point, even if you're trying to move forward, have one group meeting, get everyone together, make sure you're all on the same page. My last thing I'll say in regards to ranger safety and ensuring the safety of your responders who are packing is that our collection staff finally complained about the lack of ranger safety during these evacs after IGR, and I'm happy to say that it is resulting in actual policy changes within state parks. So now we are reassured that any collection staff responding to an incident will have a ranger on site to help protect them and give them instant updates. And that's how it always should have been, and that's how it's going to be moving forward. So we're really happy about that. Who knows what it'll be like moving forward. We're all learning how these evacs are working in the face of ever increasing fire danger. But thanks to the HEART program, people like Claire and myself have a much better trove of knowledge and skill sets to move forward with it. So thanks very much, you guys. Looking forward to the Q&A, and that's the news from state parks.